Hello and welcome to another episode of Haga Plays. Just in time for the end of winter and the beginning of spring, I had intended to make a video covering the games that make me think of the summer. But when I woke up this morning, I saw this. So instead, today I'm making something completely different. In fact, today I'm not even covering games at all. This January, it was confirmed that a new Expendables movie is in the works and that it's going to come out next summer. And at the time I'm recording this, it's intended to be the final Expendables movie. Considering the amazing cast, these movies should have been the pinnacle of action, but unfortunately they've fallen short. So today I'm going to cover 5 things I want to see improved for the next movie. So we've heard of the Expendables receiving a female equivalent called the Expendables. And in Expendables 2, there was a female expendable with the character of Maggie. Maggie was, however, underutilized, as her most notable contribution to the movie was her flirting with Stallone, plus that she wasn't an actual action star. What I want to see is a few badass chicks who can kick ass every bit as much as the guys. And yes, I said a few because I don't want the franchise to have one token female. It's not like there's a lack of talented women with experience in the action genre. As I've already confessed, I have a soft spot for Michelle Rodriguez, but beyond her, we've got the likes of Scarlett Johansson, Mila Jovovich, Angelina Jolie, Uma Thurman, and Charlize Theron. The key here is of course to allow the female expendable to be every bit as badass as the guys, to use these actors' strengths to further the action and not make every single woman into a love interest. And if you do decide for one of these ladies to become a love interest, let it be a girl in the same age range. Yet again, it's not like we have a shortage of women. We have Sigourney Weaver, who's been mentioned in these contexts time and time again. But we also have Pam Grier, Linda Hamilton, Michelle Yeoh, Grace Jones, and Lucy Lawless. A final point here is the planned Expendables franchise. The idea of a series of spin-off movies featuring an all-female crew of mercenaries. I have nothing against the idea, but I don't think it justifies the lack of female Expendables in the main franchise. One of the main issues with the Expendables so far is that the characters don't feel very fleshed out. I mean, if you look at Randy Couture and his character Tollroad, what's he about? What's his unique quirk? What's he like as a person? What's his unique skill that makes him important to the team? I honestly have virtually no idea. I honestly don't know. Virtually his entire dialogue is him talking about his ear. Really, apart from Stallone and perhaps Jason Statham, most of these stars receive too little screen time and are poorly established. Of course, in part this is down to the quite large cast. I mean, the more characters you have, the less screen time there is to go around. However, let's look at another movie with a substantial amount of important characters. It's hard to imagine today, but when the original Fast and the Furious came out, no one knew who Vin Diesel or Michelle Rodriguez or Paul Walker were. Yet, even though the movie starts on square one with unknown actors playing brand new characters, and that there's really one clear-cut protagonist, it takes the time necessary to establish a whole world of characters beyond him. Every single member of the Toretto gang manages to be memorable. There's even time to properly establish a nemesis for the Toretto gangs, who are the villains. And this doesn't happen at the cost of action, as The Fast and the Furious is one of those movies that just keeps on giving. There's a point in a movie where you feel that you've already gotten your money's worth, yet you're pleasantly surprised when you find out that there's more. In fact, the rich characters enrich the action. The Toretto gang's struggle to rescue Vince wouldn't have been remotely as thrilling if the characters and their bond hadn't been so fleshed out. nor would we have understood why Brian decided to avenge Jesse or let Toretto go twice if we hadn't seen them bonding or learned of the gang's motives. So, what's holding the Expendables back? With such famous actors, it shouldn't be hard to make these characters memorable. Why has it failed to establish the characters after 3 movies? I feel that the main culprit here is Stallone himself. While the franchise wouldn't have existed without him, the movies give him way too much screen time, and the scripts have given him way too many quirks. I mean, he's the leader of the Expendables. Everything he owns has a skull on it. He flies the plane, he runs around with dual pistols, which he can shoot really fast, and he's got a signature revolver on top of that. Beyond that, he's got a really cool car, he always gets the girl, and it's always him killing the main bad guy. For most of the characters, personalities and quirks were only ever hinted at. Cruise is seen cooking and talks about food in one scene, so we can assume that he's culinarily inclined. Lundgren's character did study chemical engineering like the real Lundgren, and in one scene he's caught carrying a PDA, which could potentially be a hint towards him being a bit of a closet nerd. Personally, I think you could do a whole lot of cool stuff if you take these quirks and take them a step further. Let Cruz be the gang's designated chef. Perhaps he could even have a cooking channel on YouTube and seduce ladies with his cooking. And maybe recovering drug addict and genius nerd Lundgren could have a Draken fighter he's restoring in his basement as a form of self-therapy, which might just happen to come in handy in the last act of the movie. This is somewhat related to the earlier point about underdeveloped characters. Not just in movies, but in comics and video games especially, characters are defined by their weapons. The most obvious example of this is Captain America and his shield. In the Legend of Zelda franchise, the one who wields the Master Sword is the one destined to save Hyrule. And what would Dirty Harry have been without the most powerful handgun in the world? They'll blow your head clean off. Or James Bond without his iconic Walther PPK. And in terms of villains, would Castor Troy be the iconic 90s villain he is today if it wasn't for his twin golden Colts? This, however, is something the Expendables franchise has failed on completely. Apart from Terry Crews occasionally getting something cool to play with, everyone's running around with the same generic short M4 rifles, which are constantly fired in full auto. They don't feel powerful, they don't look interesting, and they most certainly don't help in telling anything about the characters. And while Stallone does run around with 2 Colts and a revolver as signature weapons, they're all black and look completely generic. These guys aren't soldiers. Make their guns pop by making them big, chromed, and with wood trim. Make them seem powerful by making it clear that they have recoil and bombastic sound effects. Take a lesson from the John Woo school of action movies and make something as simple as reloading into a spectacle. Give them pump-action shotguns just so that they can pump them in slow motion. Show audiences something they haven't seen before. They should be fairly straightforward. Give each character a personalized set of weapons. Make it fit their personality and the way they fight. Lundgren is a crazy Swede, so why not give him a Carl Gustav recoilless rifle, coupled with a Swedish K for close quarters combat? Stallone's famous for playing Rambo, so why not give him an M60 with the gnarly add-ons? At its core, the reason people care about The Expendables is that it promises to be an action movie featuring all our favorite action stars from the past 30 years or more. The idea of having Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Lundgren, Van Damme, Norris, Jet Li, and Jason Statham in the same flick seems like a recipe for unparalleled action. But as I said before, the franchise has a problem with undercooked characters. A big part of this is that Stallone's view of the franchise isn't the same as the audience's view of the franchise. You see, Stallone has on many occasions said that to him, The Expendables is a way for him to help his friends boost their movie careers. That is why the franchise doesn't just star classic action stars, but wrestlers and MMA fighters. The most obvious example of this is Expendables 3, where about half of the movie is spent establishing a new, younger secondary Expendables team, where no one's actually being played by an action star. Another part in this is that it seems like whenever an actor has actually had enough screen time and been properly established, they get immediately written out of the franchise. For example, Mickey Rourke's character seems quite complete. A tortured soul turned artist who gets new women all the time but can't keep them no matter how hard he tries. The problem is that he's only in the first movie and is then never mentioned again. Jet Li's character is also given a fair bit of screen time in the first movie and actually has an interesting relationship with Lundgren's character, but it's then dropped 5 minutes into the second movie, yet again, never to be seen again. I'm not saying that the franchise should be action heroes only. I'm just saying that time spent establishing new characters is time that could have been spent establishing or fleshing out already existing characters. I find it a waste to establish characters on screen, then just cross them out in favor of new characters. As a viewer, I want payoff for my investment, and just writing out what may be my favorite character is quite detrimental. When going to watch an action movie, what's the most important thing? The natural answer to that question is, of course, good action. Action movies are probably more dependent on their visuals than any other genre. For most people, it wasn't the Wachowski brothers' philosophies that made people fall in love with The Matrix. It was the unique action and the cool visual style that drew people in. Likewise, John Woo's entire career is built around fast and eye-popping action. Characters run, climb over things, and are generally very mobile throughout the entirety of the action scenes. As a contrast, the Expendables movies are quite dull to look at. The camera work feels uninspired and the characters are quite static. They stand bolt upright, fire their guns in full auto from their hips, like they're an unenthusiastic soccer mom forced to go to the paintball course as part of obligatory team building. Naturally, this isn't the case at all times, but generally the action in the Expendables isn't thrilling. You very rarely feel that our heroes are in peril. You rarely feel that the villain might actually win. Some may argue that many of the actors in this franchise are, at this point, fragile pensioners. Thus, you can't expect them to do combat roles and wire work. To that I retort that in the 1996 movie The Rock, a 65-year-old Sean Connery, who wasn't in remotely as good shape as Stallone and Schwarzenegger are today, managed to look like an absolute badass. And several of the actors still are more than capable of pulling off action scenes. I mean, at the time of the first Expendables, Statham was in his absolute peak, and Dolph Lundgren was doing this live on Swedish television. But the style of the action itself isn't the only aspect of the action that's holding movies back. The visuals themselves are a big part. You see, action movies of the 80s and 90s, which is what The Expendables is supposed to be a throwback to, always seem to take place in the summer. Even in a dystopian future where corporations rule society, or when a terrorist has taken your identity so convincingly that neither your wife or your daughter can tell the difference, the sun would still be shining. Look at this scene in The Running Man. Look at how blue lighting is made to make the night scenes come to life. I mean, look at the interior shots of the Erewhon prison in Face Off. Look at how the supposedly gray walls of the prison are linen green, how everyone's dressed in blue, and how rust and part of the lighting brings tones of orange into the world. The guards even have rifles with wood trim to make them more visible. The visuals put the viewer in a good mood and make the movie appealing to watch. This stands in stark contrast with the Expendables movies, which have a really gray and grainy look. Every city they're in looks dark. Every forest or field they're in looks brown and autumnous. Every interior they're in looks worn and dull. Whenever filming at night, nearly everything is black. Things aren't helped by the fact that the Expendables and their adversaries are all dressed in gray and or black and have black guns. Let's take this scene as an example. Our heroes have spent the night at a diner located in a replica of 1950s New York. They get attacked by an army of henchmen and a tank. They fight until they run out of ammunition when Chuck Norris swoops in to save the day. This sounds like the potentially best action scene in the history of action movies. But the dinner is gray, the street is gray, the Expendables are dressed in gray, the henchmen are dressed in black, tank is black. It all looks very depressing and uninspired. So, that was a bit of a rant about the Expendables franchise. All in all, this is a franchise with lots of potential, which I hope that the next movie will live up to. Do you agree on my views? What would you improve for the next movies? Do you want me to make more movie-based videos like this? Let me know in the comments section below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. This has been Jacob Holgerson, signing out.